Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. It's a situation that probably hadn't been seen since the Middle Ages. Rats overwhelming Los Angeles, homeless defecating in the streets, a health emergency. And what are the people doing about it? Well, you probably don't want to hear. Ben Kennedy has discovered something shocking. Public officials are refusing to deal with this horrible epidemic.
Homeless advocates say this is a crisis and are even reaching out to the White House hoping President Trump can help.
What you're seeing is a row of tents.
Those rows make up Skid Row, a 50-block area with the country's largest homeless population that's only continuing to grow.
California is experiencing a massive spike in its rodent population.
Reform California reports this rampant rat infestation has even caused the spread of dangerous diseases like typhus. Dr. Drew Pinsky calls it a health crisis, something he's not seen in this country for 100 years. He even compared downtown L.A. to a third world country because of its public health problems and lack of sanitation.
Rats have overtaken the city. It's not consistent with civilization. How many must die before we change directions?
In 2019, homeless numbers in L.A. County rose by 12% to nearly 59,000 people. To top that, a quarter of the country's homeless population live in California.
I have to respond to the systemic failures of our country in helping people like this. And it's not going to be pretty, but it worked.
Officer Dion Joseph has covered life on the skids here for 22 years, helping people like Rose who battle drug addiction for more than a decade.
God bless you, man.
Thanks to people like Officer Joseph, Rose is now clean.
Now I got keys to my home, baby.
Yes. How does it feel?
It feels good. You can wake up knowing you're gonna wake up and everything's gonna be all right.
Has Rose been an inspiration to many to take the next step?
Rose is an inspiration to me. I don't know how many people she's inspired in the street, but she's an inspiration to me. She's why I keep doing what I do.
Now, success stories like Rose are needed more than ever. Andy, would you consider this to be a crisis?
It is absolute FEMA-like, Red Cross-like, National Guard-like disaster. It is an epidemic of homelessness.
Reverend Andy Bales heads up Union Rescue Mission, the largest homeless shelter and recovery program in the country. Bales' dedication to helping those in need led to the loss of his leg due to a flesh-eating disease he contracted while handing out water to the homeless.
After you lost your leg, did that ever deter you from getting back out there to help people?
No, I actually missed 4 days of work because I had my leg taken off. What will Jesus do miraculously through us today? Without that faith, we couldn't do what we do.
For many on Skid Row, the missions here are the only hope of growing out of poverty.
We've been here for 25 years in the neighborhood. We've never left.
Reverend Matthew Barnett's Dream Center is a Skid Row mainstay, helping those facing abuse, addiction, and poverty.
I think the goal is to try to get people out of survival mindset because people get desperate when they're trying to survive.
Survival for this part of East Central LA may depend on changing laws in D.C.
Let's change laws and make it easier for their loved ones to gain conservatorships over them and take control of their lives so they're not in crisis and walking down the streets of Skid Row.
Now, the LA Homeless Services Authorities report that women and children make up 40% of the homeless population. One more reason why Officer Joseph says more shelters are needed to help families, kids, and the elderly. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Los Angeles.
The biggest city in America, the biggest homeless population. Who ever heard of such a thing? Third world country, flesh-eating bacteria. Well, in other news, America's debt level is growing to levels not seen since World War II. John Jessup has more on that.
Pat, that is right. The annual deficit for fiscal 2019 had been projected to reach $896 billion. According to revised numbers by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, it will now reach $960 billion. Next year's deficit is expected to top $1 trillion. In the next decade, the government is forecast to add $12.2 trillion in deficits. The CBO says a recent bipartisan agreement to avoid a government default is partially to blame. That agreement lifted caps on discretionary spending, over the next 2 years. Well, more troubling news for the economy and particularly on the jobs front. The Bureau of Labor Statistics now says 500,000 fewer jobs were created over the past year than initially thought. Earlier reports said the economy added about 230,000 jobs per month between March 2018 and April 2019. New information suggests the number is closer to 180,000 additional jobs per month. Those updated figures are based on state unemployment insurance records. The original data comes from surveys of hundreds of thousands of work sites, just as economists predict a recession before 2021. President Trump's latest move to curb illegal immigration is coming under fire. While it would keep families together, it would also detain them until their claims are processed. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story.
The new DHS policy would effectively end the practice of catch and release. Critics say it would cause more problems than it solves.
Right now we have more than a million plus backlog in terms of the immigration courts.
Immigration advocates question the practicality of the move.
Most likely it's going to take several years. And then what the government's trying to do is say all of those people who are in detention, all the families who are in detention should be detained indefinitely while that process is pending.
The policy, announced Wednesday, would end a previous rule that children detained with their families could be held for 20 days. Now families would be kept together and held until their court date. Acting DHS Secretary Kevin McAleenan defended the move and also unveiled plans for new housing with medical facilities, soccer fields, and even access to video conferencing for court proceedings. He said the old agreement basically served as an incentive for illegal entry.
Human smugglers advertise, and intending migrants know well that even if they cross the border illegally, arriving at our border with a child has meant that they will be released into the United States to wait for court proceedings that could take 5 years or more.
Democrats are also blasting the change, accusing the president of wanting to punish children.
This president is absolutely determined to carry out maximum cruelty with little children who are brown.
Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi adding in a statement, quote, "The administration is seeking to codify child abuse." President Trump says congressional inaction is creating the crisis at the border.
If the Democrats would meet and we could fix the loopholes and asylum, which is what you're talking about to an extent. But let me just tell you, very much I have the children on my mind. It bothers me very greatly.
The president is also coming under fire for considering ending birthright citizenship, which is guaranteed in the 14th Amendment.
We're looking at that very seriously, birthright citizenship, where you have a baby in our land, you walk over the border, have a baby. Congratulations, the baby's now a U.S. citizen. We're looking at it very, very seriously.
The new rule would put more pressure on Congress to act. It would take effect in 60 days, but it already faces quite a few legal challenges, so it could take longer. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Pat, back to you.
It's simply amazing that Congress refuses to act on this matter. And this whole thing of birthright citizenship, they say it's, quote, guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. But I'm not sure that the guarantee is exactly as stated. It's if somebody is born to a to an American citizen, that's one thing. But the idea is somebody sneaks across the border and has a baby, suddenly that baby is a citizen of the United States. It makes no sense whatsoever, should be changed, and these other rules should be changed. We cannot be a dumping ground for all of the poor and the needy and the dispossessed of the entire world. It'll destroy America, and any intelligent person realizes that. So something has got to be done, and done quickly. But Congress refuses to act. I think they think that these people coming in illegally and otherwise, when they give them citizenship, the Democrats will own them as their potential voting bloc, and they want that. But it's terrible. I mean, it's bad for America, and we shouldn't be playing politics with people's lives. John?
Pat, it is possibly the longest-running gospel crusade in the nation. The Southern California Harvest Crusade with Pastor Greg Laurie marks its 30th anniversary this year. It begins Friday night and includes performances from Christian artists like For King and Country, Jeremy Camp, Lecrae, and Chris Tomlin. Pastor Laurie told CBN News that it's all about sharing the gospel of Christ.
It's like a feeling of celebration, almost like a big Christian party. But I don't mean to trivialize it in any way, because when the moment comes for the gospel to be preached, people are quiet. I mean, it's amazing to me to see a stadium fall silent to hear what the Bible has to say. And the most important moment is when we extend that invitation and we see thousands of people walk down on that field to make a profession of faith to follow Christ.
And starting tomorrow night, our viewers can see the services every night on the CBN News Channel platforms. That's August 23rd through the 25th at 10 p.m. Eastern. All you have to do is go to cbnnews.com to find out how and where you can watch. And Pastor Laurie says 500,000 people, 500,000 people, have come to Christ through his crusades over the past 30 years.
Well, our congratulations to Greg, and we wish him the very best.